tenía que poner por debajo, porque quería probar el sonido.
No me llega nada.
¿No?
No me llega nada, ¿no? Ahora sí, me empieza a llegar.
¿Sabes?
Dale, no sabes lo más alto, ¿no? Que va a estar.
Está al máximo ahora.
Vale, pues lo veo
Está
ahí.
ok.
Vale.
Vale.
Vale, te fue.
¿Lo dejo abierto? Me fío de ti.
Sí.
Vale.
No te preocupes, me quedo yo. ¿Quieres tú o con el analógico?
El analógico y canción.
Vale, pues ahí tienes la lista.
Vale.
Y
No, era
perdón
simplemente...
por el...
No, era porque aquí no sabría cuál darle y como sé que arranca, para que tuviese uno que tuviese sonido.
Pregunta que si os micros internos da cámara levan falta. Non leva, non? Doce máis en canto me digas.
Cigarette and said, man, these things will kill me someday. Exhaled smoke and said, here's to hoping. that you follow every day. When I drink my own straight, my feet down. It's not as bad as it seems.
Un poco mierda, ¿no? This mami, sí, grabando, está grabando.
I try to dream of you when you're far away.
Esto es. That's it. The lights will come on.
Yes. Bueno, buenos días y bienvenido todo el mundo a esta masterclass que tenemos con Amy Halpern, que es una AULACREA. Bueno, antes de decir nada, voy a decir que esto va a tener traducción simultánea y quien quiera, necesite la traducción simultánea, tenemos muy pocos cascos, se los podéis pedir a Iván, que está haciendo el sonido ahí en la parte de atrás. Quien quiera cascos, que los pida rapidito porque hay pocos. Y si se agotan los cascos, también ahí se está retransmitiendo por streaming con la traducción simultánea. Os podéis conectar con vuestros teléfonos y escucharlo con cascos. Vale, eso por la parte de intendencia. Bueno, acabamos de ver una película de Amy Halpern, que es una de las invitadas que tenemos de este año. Es una cineasta neoyorquina que ha desarrollado prácticamente toda su carrera en Los Ángeles. Y bueno, pues la descubrimos gracias a un programa que trajo aquí Canyon Cinema hace 4 años ya. Quedamos totalmente fascinados y una de las cosas que más nos llamó la atención de las películas de Amy Halpern es precisamente el uso del sonido, la manera en la que usa el sonido. Entonces, bueno, pues esta masterclass va a girar en torno a ese tema del sonido. Y bueno, sabéis que hay un reverso del sonido que es el silencio y que también es un componente importante, pues si hablamos de esa capa sensorial, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, yo no voy a decir más, le voy a dejar ya la palabra a Amy y bueno, pues esta tarde ya sabéis que podremos ver Falling Lessons, que es una película que a mí me ha tenido días pensando después de verla. Es una obra como muy especial, pero bueno, vamos por partes. Vamos primero con la masterclass y por favor recibidla con un aplauso.
Thank you. Thank you. I have one. Hello. Can you hear me? Thank you for coming to hear me talk about silence. I'll make a lot of noise, but I'm talking about silence and the importance of loud silence in filmmaking. Thank you for coming on such a beautiful day indoors. And so the first film that you saw is the third part. It's called Cannonballs, and they are actual cannonballs from the American Revolutionary War in the 1770s. And they're in a park near where I grew up, and one of the best games was to walk on them. And because they're round, they interfere with your balance, and so they dictate certain rhythms to you, which are unique to balance and walking. And I always found that very beautiful, and that's why those were filmed. And I think of that film as extremely loud. When I started to make movies, it was my desire only to make silent films, because I think loud silence is very exquisite, and it does something special to your focus and sensitivity to gestures and other movements. So now we'll see something else. Por favor. Oop, who's this? It's okay. Lights, please. Thank you. So that's Mikis Theodorakis playing in 1972. He died last year, as maybe you know. He was playing in the United States in a limited visa. He was illegal. His music was illegal in Greece at the time. If you played any of his music, even the most simple and romantic, like Make Your Bed for Two, for you and for me, and We'll Embrace Until Dawn, and then everything will rise fresh, they would close your club. And even in the United States, because the junta was paid for by the United States, he was subdued there also. And his visa did not allow him to make any public statement, only to perform music. And I saw him and I was floored completely by his music and also by his playing. And also by his habit, which was always to wear a black frock, and his hands would become these disembodied animals, which were, to me, explicit of the music and of the synchronized rhythms that he was playing. So for me, that's another example of very loud, silent music. I chose to record silent on purpose because I knew that what he was doing would be visible. The what?
Who was the composer?
Oh, Mikis Theodorakis.
Ah, yeah, it was written.
Yes, but I'm sorry, I used the Greek titles. And so, consistent with this is the idea that if the gestures are eloquent, you don't need sound at all. I never felt the need to put sound on this thing. And at the time that I made it, I was committed always and only to make silent films. The next film I'll show you is gestures of an animal, which if there had been any sound at all, it would have inflected your reaction to it, instead of taking it seriously for what it is, something exquisite, balletic. Well, you'll see. Why don't we watch that one? Next film, por favor. So you can see in this that the gestures of these animals is so minute, so particular, and I did nothing to change their timing, which is amazing to me. The last one who held for a perfect count of 4 before leaving was amazing. And if I had put anything with it, the danger is it could have become comical or some other, or horrible or something. I wanted not to change that at all what they were doing. But there's a problem with film. It's a danger with film, is that fundamentally any sound goes with any picture. I recommend trying this at home with a television and whatever sound device you have. Anything works, but does it work in a way that it should is the question. And so you have to be very careful not to be too liberal or too relaxed when you put sound with image, because you're going to end up doing something perhaps inadvertently that undercuts what you really had in mind. We could look at the next piece. What I showed you just now was a small part of something that you'll see more of if you come, I think, tomorrow. This next one will be a whole movie. I think if it's also an example of something that is loud, and also you'll see words written on the screen which are written words, written sounds. So why don't we watch that? This, you could say, was a collision between the two cities that I am acquainted with. One was New York, which is my home. Estoy en Neoyorqueño. And then I moved to Los Angeles, which was very jarring and upsetting. Also not a city. But, and among the curious things are the small pieces of animation with the cartoon were literally found on the street as garbage, because the film business at that time existed and was very strong. And so there was film debris everywhere. Very good for experimental filmmakers, because equipment, film stock, extra stuff like this, which was kind of a surprise to find. The animation is my own, the one of the woman ripping her stomach. It's the only cell animation I've ever done, but it was something I did at the time. And rhythmically, I thought that this was also sufficiently loud not to require any sound. So there is sound that's necessary, but it's also important to decide. It's like an option you do or do not take. It's something that shouldn't be taken for granted. I think the next one that I'm going to show you, the sound is actually part. It's literally what you're seeing. So the sound is actually what you're seeing. It's sync sound, and that'll be clear to you. Well, in that case, obviously, that's why I needed to make the film with sound, because you'll see. So please go ahead. The title of that one refers to, is a Buddhist expression, which refers to the privilege that one has to be in a human body and to let the sound take you out. For those of you who were last night at the performance, in which we had a sound bath, a live performance with the colors, it's a similar intention, which is that the sound carries you out. And I have not discussed this with the filmmakers, but I gather that by the way it was put together through the spectrum and the way it was played, that was the intentional effect. I trust most of you have seen a Tibetan bell bowl before. Anybody not seen one? It's a bowl that's made of a kind of brass, but it's really a proprietary a bunch of alloys stuck together that make this particular sound when you play it that way. You can do it with a regular wine glass as well, but this has a particular resonance and is designed for meditation. So, next, I have for you a film in which the sound is more suggestive. It's not literal. That's okay. You can keep them out because we'll start the movie in a minute. This film is designed, well, you'll see. It's actually designed as a foreign film. That is to say, there's dialogue at the end, which is completely non sequitur. You don't need to know literally what's being said. I like that very much in general with sound. It's a phenomenon I think of as gaining in the translation. When you don't know what's being said, sometimes it's much better. So let's watch that one. But and before we do, it's a sound in which it's designed for reasons that are textural as well as informative to the image.
Look, I'm only saying. I don't think I could stand to miss your eyes.
It has never been this excruciating.
Well, just take an attitude.
Look, talk me out of this, will you?
Nah,
Do you know?
I don't know.
Do you ever wonder why?
Yeah, I often wonder why.
How odd.
She said, and she was.
You and your third person. Eat my dust.
Lights, please. So silly dialogue aside, that's what it felt like intensely in Los Angeles in those days. You don't need a dictator to have too many police and too many armies. And there was a distinct sense at the time that of occupation, even though it was not literally true, it felt precisely like that. So the next film I will show is sound that I considered necessary to the picture, even though it's not indigenous to it. That is to say, it's a long movie, which I think will show the whole thing of today, but it only had sound that was native to it in a very few sections of the film. But when I would cut the thing, which I did silent, I could hear tonalities through the whole thing that made the sense of the movie clear to me at the time, consistently. And so I began to flesh out what those sounds had to be for texture, for information, but also musically. Most of the sounds are not music. Almost none of them are music. And I know that it was necessary for this because even my close companion, who at the time was a very good friend of mine and is now my mate, who watched the film in various phases of cutting through many years, when he finally saw it with the soundtrack complete, said he finally understood what I was doing. Meanwhile, I thought he'd understood the whole time because I thought he knew me well enough to see what I was doing. But apparently, without this suggestive sound built, it was not clear to him at all. So let's watch. It's just a small section from Falling Lessons. Sync. The film itself is in sync. I'm not sure what that displacement was caused by. The pounding will be in sync in the movie. Those are just 3 short sections, but as you can see, this is a sound that's completely fabricated. There's no reason for these things to be connected. It's just to make the sense of the picture as a whole with sound, with occasional words, virtually none of which are important to understand explicitly, and build the sense of the tone of the film. I've shown this to non-English speaking audiences of children, and they understood absolutely everything, which was very reassuring because adults usually stand on the ceremony for a while and waste 15 minutes of the beginning of it. I don't have any fear of you as an audience, since you already are here because you love experimental work. But a normal audience who are hunting for what genre this might possibly be usually waste a first quarter of the film. So I consider that necessary sound, because without it, it does not play, except in my head when I'm watching it. And that's not sufficient. I want to talk about implausible sound. So what you'll see now is sound that actually is sync sound, but it makes no sense whatsoever while you're seeing it. It was shot in a museum in Washington, D.C. when David LeBrun and I were shooting a movie called Breaking the Maya Code, and we had the great opportunity to take Mayan objects out of the cases and photograph them on a turntable. And this particular bowl, which is a masterpiece from about 600 AD, which has carvings on the outside referring to refreshment and the growth of corn, and is apparently empty, was made by a master potter with a space on the inside. So there are either beans or pieces of pottery in there that make a sound. When the curator took it out of the case for us and showed us this phenomenon, we were completely knocked out by it. And also it occurred that a nice gesture, a gift back to them, would be to film it in action with the curator holding, because otherwise when you see it in the case, you don't really have the slightest idea. You may be told that it's a ceremonial object, we think possibly, probably for a water or rain ceremony, but unless it's activated by moving it, which doesn't happen in a museum normally, you would have no idea. So you're now going to see a Maya double-bottomed bowl, which is just an illustration. You will not see why it's making sound. And we've shown it in places where people said, why did you put that sound with it? We put that sound with it because even in the real space with the object, we didn't believe what we were seeing. So, but it is sync sound. So let's watch that for a moment. I find that shocking every time I see it. And it's an amazing piece of special effects equipment, because if you think of this as a ceremony that was done, as we say, prehistoric, before written history, which is actually inaccurate, because the Maya were writing history all the time. It's on their walls, it's on their stelas, it's on the few remaining books. There's 4, maybe 4.5 that we know about that exist. So now I'd like to speak about music just a little bit. This is the most dangerous thing for film, because the truth is that any music goes with any image. Truly, truly, truly. It's too easy. I consider it a terribly cheap shot. A professional example might be a famous American movie called Apocalypse Now about the Vietnam War, in which the filmmaker took a work of art that already existed. That is to say, he took The Doors music, The End, thank you, which already, with your eyes closed, takes you beyond. And he slapped that on top of what he made, and that carried the whole scene. And that's what I mean by a cheap shot. The work wasn't his at that point, it was his, shall we say, being opportunist with something that already could take you there. Music is wonderful, but it, in my opinion, should be used very, very, very cautiously. It's wonderful. What I'll show you now for the very last piece is something, first you'll see sound which is clearly a fabrication that wouldn't necessarily at all go with the image, but does something with it. And it ends with a piece of music that I think of as a piece of dessert, because you can give music as a reward or as a payoff, as a clincher, something to sort of nail the intention at the end. But I use it only sparingly, and I recommend also that everyone else use it sparingly, because it requires so much less work, so much less intention, so much less deliberation, that you can really be sloppy with music and get away with shit. So let's look at this thing. This is just the last bit of a movie called 3 Minute Hells. It's the last 2 sections of this movie. So the first one, you'll see, gives you fully a narrative situation which otherwise does not exist in the image at all. That's the first section you'll see. It's the second to last section of the movie. The sound is so potent, it's very upsetting. So may I give you a trigger warning, as they're calling it now, to be polite? So brace yourself, it's unpleasant. And then the last sound, the last piece, which is the 7th part of the movie, is what I was describing as fabrication, because once again, the image has nothing to do with the sound. Put together, they become an interesting synthesis. And then there's music. Okay. I should say about the bees. The bees, which were marvelously recorded in something called the beehive tomb, actually, the tholos of the Pelops family in Greece. The bees were living in the beehive-shaped tomb, and they were very agreeable about coming to the microphone when I put something sweet on the end of it. And so naturally, in order to make the music, I had to figure out what key they were singing in, because I wanted to be in the right key with the bees. Well, the joke was that the bees were singing in B. True. I still don't quite get that, but it's true. So in the first section, and this is a film called 3 Minute Hells, in which there's 7 sections, the only one which is actually as long as 3 minutes. They all seem endless, actually. But the only one that's actually by the clock as long as 3 minutes is the one that you saw, the 6th one, which is excruciating. Music is still a problem, even though I'm telling you what I already told you and I know it. I even made a mistake in finishing films recently. One of the films that I'll show tomorrow, I had for a long time the idea that I would have music going in, let the music play visually, silently throughout the film, and then have music going out. And so I recorded it with a musician I was working with. I recorded it twice. The first time didn't work. So we went back in the studio and recorded it again and recut tracks to try this idea that I had as an idée fixe. I was wrong. So there's now no music in that film. So as I say, this warning I'm giving you guys is actually a true warning which I take to heart, because I've only recently made that mistake again myself after a life of extreme caution. I could say more, but I can ask also if you have questions or things strike your mind. Just to say that the 6th section with the feet in the doorway gets me every time I watch it, even now. You still think, actually sometimes I fall apart watching it, because you think, who is that in the doorway? Is that an informant who knows what's going on? Who set up their neighbors? Who is the person in the doorway? We're the person in the doorway. So the caution that we demand of ourselves as citizens in life is the same caution that we have to demand of ourselves as filmmakers, which is not to screw around with this stuff. And always stay honest to what you're doing and not use cheap tricks. And that's all. Any questions, any comments?
I do have a question.
Please.
Yeah.
Maybe more lights.
Yeah. Should I go?
Please.
I will come here.
You can come. I better be careful of that. I'm the only one in danger of that speaker.
It's not a good idea.
It's only my microphone, I think.
No, I wanted to ask you something that was implied in the credits of the last film.
Yes.
Is the use of the Foley.
Oh, yes.
So.
Shall I define Foley? Does everybody know what Foley means? Foley are all the sound effects that flesh out the sounds that you hear. All those sounds which, when you're recording picture, if you're doing straight filmmaking in which you're recording dialogue or conversation or something like that, your microphone is only, and carefully only, picking up what's said, because we are word heavy the way modern people function. But that leaves out all the really interesting stuff. Footsteps, which is a special art form. As Tui referred to it yesterday, as Mickey Mousing the footsteps for a cartoon. These are the things that flesh something out and give it reality. There's something I'll show tomorrow in which you're seeing somebody, it happens to be someone who's not living anymore. And you see him a few times, but he chuckles once. Another time you hear him go, and that, with looking at him, gives him a presence which isn't otherwise there. So in this case, the Foley was all of the effects that you're hearing, the people eating, the glass breaking, the footsteps on the staircase. That was the Foley, and that's why so many people were involved. That's what is meant.
And was there like a script for that Foley in particular?
Well, I wrote the script because I knew what the scene needed, and I would record the parts, watch them with a picture, and oh no, I need also this. So yes, I made a script for it. Not distinctly a script of what's said, no, but a script of what the sounds needed to be to make that horrible situation.
Yeah, it's really disturbing.
Yeah.
I was like...
Sorry. But, I mean, that's what we have in our lives, is the horrible and the beautiful. And our job is to mediate between the two of them and not to conceal the shit.
Questions?
More lights possible so we can see the folks?
What?
Can we put more lights on?
Sí, tenemos más luces como para no estar aquí a ciegas. Over there. We have a microphone.
Oh, good. Thank you, John.
Thank you. I really enjoyed what you said about how precisely sound should be used or not should be used, because I think it's really a problem that a lot of artists focus so much on the image and somehow forget the sound, and I really like the way you worked with that.
Thank you.
But I also would like to point out that I found it very interesting with how much precise intensity you film the body. Like you see like the breathing, and it's also, it's like a sensitive image for me with a lot of love somehow. So I would like that you talk a little bit about that, if it's fine for you.
Well, it's everybody's commonality is our bodies. That's our instrument. And an interesting experience watching all the films in the festival so far is how many times the same images reoccur, that we all are drawn to the same thing all the time. Hands, bodies, flowers, sunsets, the moon, windows. All of these things are dear for us. They're precious. And so, yeah, that's the home of everybody. So when you are trying to speak to everybody, then you want to refer to what their own personal home is, what their instrument is. That's what I meant by suggestive textural sound. For example, where the woman drinks the beer and you hear the cat purring, I was hoping to recall that tingling that you get down your throat and into your chest from the beer and the, what's it called? The bubbles come and tickle your interior like that. But all those things are interesting to me. And I think they're underused in cinema. There's somebody there.
Yes. Microphone is
coming.
Going there. Attached to Juanma.
Can you hear me? Yes. One just very specific question. I think you might have answered it already. On cigarette burn?
Yes.
I noticed you had a military advisor.
Yes,
for
yes.
for the airplane sounds.
Yes, well, for all of them.
Right. And in the drone, I thought could either be something mechanical or purring.
Yes.
Which was it?
Drone?
Just the constant drone in the beginning, the very low.
That's actually cat purring.
That's what I thought.
It's been Dopplered down
Right.
so that it's changing pitch.
Okay.
Which I always think is very interesting.
Right. In the beginning, I thought it was mechanical, but then I thought this is purring.
No, it's not mechanical. It's
Right.
the cat slowed down, slowed
Yes.
down, slowed down. So it was it felt even
Yeah, it was
more
amazing.
physical
Yeah.
doing that,
I
I
love
thought.
that.
And the reason the military advisor is the same person also whose body you see in the credits, and it's the same person who is the dedication at the end to, whoops. Nice, nice. The same person who the film is dedicated to, that was his number in prison when he came back from Vietnam as a gift of the government, because almost everybody there was on junk or some kind of drugs.
Right.
And when he had finished his time there and came back to the United States and was still working on a military base, Some authorities wanted to bust his boss for smuggling, and they've set him up with a suitcase. And so his welcome home was to go to Leavenworth, which is a military prison, very unpleasant. And so I dedicated the film to him. Yes.
I had a follow-up, which is just that point, the point of, the emotional manipulation that music, or the hijacking, that can occur.
If you will.
And that any music goes with any image. And
Yes.
This has happened to me personally so many times where there's actually like a glitch in a movie I'm watching. And for example, Spotify will come in suddenly, and I'm like, oh, interesting, directorial choice. Why is this happening?
And sometimes more interesting than the film.
But my mind will completely adapt.
We do.
And create a scenario where that makes sense.
Like roaches, human beings are very adaptable to circumstances. And so if something is presented to you, we accept it. So, that's one of the reasons making art is so dangerous. Because if you give yourself to the hands of somebody making something, then you're vulnerable to any impression that might either occur deliberately or par hasard.
Absolutely.
So that's why
I
advise
sort of,
caution.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I was going to say, I'm wondering what your feelings are. I know it's a visual medium. I find myself often doing the opposite, which is like cleaning images of natural sound in order to enhance them. Right, and sometimes I feel like I'm cheating. Like I'm going to film something,
You're
and
focusing.
then I'm like, wait, before I do this, I need to take this out. And suddenly the image, I don't want to say clean it in a way, but sometimes I feel like I'm cheating. Like it would be much
think
crappier
of it as cheating.
if
You
I
should
just
not.
left the actual sound on there.
No, I think it's not cheating.
It's just an instant effect suddenly, where suddenly it's elevated somewhat when I
You're
remove
focusing,
the sound.
and you're bringing the mind away from the natural sounds to what you as the person choosing want to focus on. I have a friend who's a native deaf woman, and she once said to me, you hearing people must be so confused all the time with all of that noise. And I said to her, no, Pearl, it's like a vision. We only hear what we're focusing on. My mother used to say to me that I was deaf, or that I would only hear what I wanted to hear. Not true. I would only hear what I was paying attention to. That's why someone was behind a camera earlier, and they weren't hearing a problem they were making, and I've done this also behind camera, is when you're focusing on something, you're not hearing anything else. You're deaf to it all. So there's nothing, I think, unseemly in your selecting what you want to be having people hear. If you call it cleaning, but it's not cheating. Well, unless you think all artifice is a cheat. No, one could go that way, but I prefer not to because my life is dedicated to it. So I don't think I can go there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good question, though. Yeah. Richard, microphone?
Actually, we need to leave the room now. I'm sorry. But
so
you can
outside.
chat outside also. You know each other, right? Sorry. Thank you, Amy, for everything.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Okay, we will be having your film tonight at 8. Not tonight because it's not going to be night, but at 8 at the Porto. So I invite you very enthusiastically to come. And thank you, Amy.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity. Thank you. Thank you. Interesting? Not too didactic?
What?
Not too didactic.